All right, 2 minutes past 12. Welcome everyone. My name is Tobias Talltorp. I will give you some information about myself a little bit later on. But first, I'd like to thank Developers Shore for inviting me to speak. And as the slide says, feel free to ask questions after the webinar or in the chat. So if you have a question when I'm presenting something, please do write it down in the chat so we can take it after the presentation. All right. So first of all, a short section about me, what I do. So what I do is I develop development teams, which means I make development teams perform better. And I also help development teams transition to remote work in a sustainable way. And the last part is quite important and often overlooked. And as some form of context and history about me, I've been a developer for 20 years, and I started out as a designer, and I build a lot of stuff. So, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about how communication changes when you go into a remote work, and you have to start communicating in an asynchronous way rather than a synchronous way. But to give you some background, everyone started working from home because of Corona. But before Corona, the view of remote work was mainly this. Like, remote work is only for a select few self-guiding introverts, and that would never work for us because we work at the office and everyone has always worked at the office. So they're basically a bit strange. But then Corona hit, and everyone got the chance to work from home. And lo and behold, a lot of people actually liked it. So this is in Swedish, but I will translate it. This is the union at Scania, a truck manufacturer, did a survey of people at knowledge workers at Scania about how they wanted to work from after the pandemic is over, and they said 96% of them want to work from home, which means that there's not 96% people who are weird at Scania, but that's basically the majority. So, but most of them don't want to work all the time remote, mostly flexible and so on, and that's the case in most companies. But there is very few companies who say, oh, we're always going to be all at the office every time, all the time. So it's changed quite a bit. And here's another statistic, and this is actually before Corona. So the trend has been moving towards remote and flexible work. And this is from Zapier, a remote company. That nearly all US knowledge workers want to work remotely. And the number that's not in this slide is that 95% said that they wanted to work somewhat flexible. And then the number 74 is that there is 74% who are willing to quit their job to work remotely. And that 26% have already quit their job for one that allows remote work. And so working remotely and in a flexible way is something is important in order to attract employees as well. But where are we now? I've sort of graphed it out a little bit for how it's been behaving. The phase number 1, that's when everyone was at the office. And the green line, that's the energy that people had. And the pink line is the productivity that was produced. And as you can see, about 50%, yeah, it did quite good at the office, but not very specifically perfect. But the energy was high. You had a lot of people there. You took some breaks. You met up at the coffee machine. You knew you were supposed to do and stuff like that. But then also the low productivity is usually from a lot of distractions, a lot of talk, a lot of meetings, a lot of unimportant stuff. But then Corona hit in phase 2, and well, priorities changed. Companies were scrambling to make this work from home work, because you couldn't get to go to the office, you weren't allowed. So priorities changed in order to facilitate that. And what a lot of companies actually quite quickly noticed, but that the productivity increased actually. And the reason for this, in my view, is that the distractions were removed, because I have 2 themes in this presentation, and one is that the time is not the same as attention, and attention is decreased by distractions. And when you have solid attention, then that's where you feel most productive. And since you removed a lot of distractions, there are some distractions at home, no doubt about that, the dishes and maybe people who were home as well with you and so on, and kids. So there are distractions, but you control them more. And so people got a lot of things done. But then in the phase 4, which is, you sort of ticked off the first things that you didn't get done at work because of all the distractions. And then now you didn't really know how to make this in a sustainable way. And so the energy was going down. And if you don't have enough energy, you're basically going to lose productivity as well. So right now we're sort of in the middle of the 4th phase, and the 5th phase is, in my view, when you start doing it in a proactive and deliberate way, rather than just ad hocing everything. Right. So I have a friend who summed it up very well. He said, "I want to have an office that I don't have to go to," and this is sort of what I think most people who say I want to have a flexible way of working is what they say. They want to have the office for some things, but not all things. So it's not it's not a Swiss Army knife to do everything, because most of the things on a Swiss Army knife you never use. I've never used that toothpick or corkscrew. So this is a short background about what state is right now, but that's not what I was supposed to talk about. But I'm going to talk about how communication is different. Because if you haven't worked from home for a long period of time, it can be overwhelming. It's a different skill, no doubt about that. It's doing its things in a different way. So I'd like to start by sort of describing it in another way, instead of all the technical tools and stuff like that. This is how communication was done at the office. It's like you're sitting around the fire, people talking. Some people are talking more and higher and louder and with more attitude and stuff like that. And then there are people who are trying to think here. You can see their question marks. They are trying to think, but they are sort of always distracted by the other ones. So they don't really get time to think. And that's, you've probably seen a bunch of developers sitting with their headphones on. They are basically working remotely, or trying to when they are at the office. So this is how communication was done in the office, and a lot of information was transferred that way. Like you go to lunch together, you talk about stuff, and this is a good way to build team camaraderie and the understanding between people and so on. But it's not very good for deep work with all the distractions. So when you remove everyone, you can still sit by the fire. It's really cozy. I do my best thinking, just watching and looking into a fire. So I get more space to think, and I can work when I am productive. Because some people are more productive in the morning. I do my best work between 7 and 12, and then I'm sort of spent. Many people work in the evenings and nights, and then sometimes I work most productively at the cafe, not maybe now, and sometimes I work more productively at home. Doesn't really matter, but I get to choose. But then also there are negative things with this. You can spend too much time going into the wrong direction because you don't get the instant feedback of a real-time conversation that you had at the office. And also it can feel lonely at times because you don't have any other people around. But this is a sort of a way of describing how things are right now as well, and where we want to go. This is Henrik Kniberg who made this a long time ago about how to lead teams and autonomy. So if you look at the left side, it says alignment there, and at the lower side it says autonomy. Autonomy is when you get to decide how to do things, come up with solutions, and alignment is how aligned you are with the company purpose, or why you go to the office or to work, basically. And the traditional way of doing it is up in the upper left quadrant. Don't look at the lower left quadrant, because then you should not really be there. But up at the upper left quadrant, there's a manager, and then he says, we need to cross the river, build a bridge. So he's telling people how to do it. And then he has some sort of unhappy workers doing what they do for money. So in that way, you have a happy business, or happy managers at least, but your developers are sad. And as I mentioned in the stats in the beginning, developers or knowledge workers are looking for other places where they can get remote work. So it's a big risk to do this. But then in the lower right quadrant, it's a lot of autonomy, but there is very little alignment. And the manager there is thinking, hope someone is working on that river problem. And no one is really working on anything, but whatever they think is fun, which means that developers are happy. If we get a lot of autonomy, we will find things to do. There is no question about that. But the business is probably sad because we're not doing things in a way that the business wants to do. So it's just a waste of money. But what you want to get to is the upper right. It's when the business is happy and the developers are happy and everyone's working as a team. And the way that you do that is the manager says, we need to cross the river. So he's in this case, he is setting a purpose for the team, and then delegating the problem solving to the team, because the team knows how to do this best. It's not one person. And just to have a note here, or semantics, a development team is not just a bunch of developers. It's the development team includes the product owners, the customers in some cases, the managers, the UX or UX user experience people, and designers. So it's a bunch of different things that need to work together. And in order to get from the many teams right now, when they're working from home, they are in the lower right quadrant because they haven't figured out how to communicate in a good way. And working from home, you get a lot of autonomy. You can't really micromanage people who work from home. But then you also need to know how to align people to the purpose that they are supposed to work against or towards. Okay, so before we go any further, there are two important facts here. One is that about 70% of all communication that happens between people is non-verbal, meaning body language, posture, how far away from a person you stand signals a lot about how much you agree with them and not. And these are all small minor signals that get lost when you are not at the office. So you have a deficiency of 70% of communication that you need to somehow make it back to. And then time is not the same as attention. So splitting up an hour into 20-minute chunks doesn't mean that you have my attention for 3 separate chunks. Attention is something that you need large blocks of, and time is something you can divide. And if you try to divide my attention like you divide your time, then you will get very little done, because when you have my attention on a problem, that's when you get value for me. And you have about 4 or 5 hours of attention every day, not 8 hours of work. So I will get back to this throughout the presentation as well, but it's good to have them up front here. So what we're going to look at here is how to communicate progress, how to provide context when you communicate with each other, how to share knowledge, and then how to set realistic expectations. I will go through them one by one. So we'll start with how to communicate progress. And if you look at the upper left part, it says, my product owner comes and asks, how's it going? And I say, pretty good. My product owner will probably look at me and say, you're shaking, you're sweating, you're trembling on your voice. You're not doing pretty good. How's it really going? And then I say, oh, yeah, it's not very good. I've been trying this thing and I don't know how to work with this SQL query anymore. I haven't done joins in 15 years. So then my product manager owner might say, oh, why don't we ask this person over at the other team? Is that okay? Then yeah, perfect. And then then it would be good. But if you translate that into the right part, it says, I just drew a little imitation of Slack, but this can be Teams or Basecamp or email or whatever you use as a way of communicating. And it says, it's the same question, how's it going? And it's the same, pretty good. But it's my avatar that's always happy, because I chose a happy avatar in Slack. And so if you cut away 70% of the communication, you miss all these minor things. And Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, they don't make up for it. In fact, in many cases, they make it worse, because you think you have all the information, but it's actually better sometimes to just turn off the camera and listen to people. So one way of doing this is, you create a Jira board with all the issues, or you have a Trello board with what you are supposed to do and stuff like that. So for every project, you have maybe a card for each thing you need to do. So then your product owner can absolutely see how you're doing and if it's going forward. And both yes and no, they can see what is being done, but they don't see what you haven't found out yet. Because if you have 10 to-dos and you've completed 8, does that mean you're 80% there? Probably not, because when you're 80% done, you have only 80% left, is basically what I've found out. So because all this minor things and all the rework and all the refactoring of code and stuff like that, that happens at the end. because then you have every bit of information that you need. So using your to-do board, or whatever you might call it, is not a good way of communicating progress and all these minor things like, how is it feeling? Is it feeling good, or do you need help, and so on? Because as a side note, most humans don't want to say I don't know, or I messed up, or I took too much on myself to do. It has to do with ego and stuff, but most people don't. So in order to do that, I usually use the hill chart. This is something that Basecamp has created in their product. It's a product for remote work, basically. But you don't need Basecamp for this. I've used it on whiteboards and paper, and just in order to communicate where we are. And every project and everything that you do goes through two phases. First, there's the figuring things out phase, where there are a lot of uncertainty, unknowns, and problem solving. And if you want to ask me how long is it going to take, I will say I don't know, because I'm figuring things out. So when I get to the top of this hill, then I know, because then I can see my way down. And then it's just about me making it happen. And then it's about certainty, confidence, and execution. So we can use this as a way to, as a developer, say, be honest with, I don't really know, but I don't really have to say that I don't know. But you will see that I don't really know, because I'm stuck in this figuring things out phase at the same place, or maybe even sliding down the hill. And it's also a way for product owners to say, we've been spending 2 weeks in the figuring out things out phase. It's taking too long, so it's not worth it anymore. So we can just postpone it, celebrate that we learned a bunch of things, but yeah, we're not going to put another 4 weeks on this. It's not worth it. It was worth 2 weeks, not 6. So that makes it easy for developers also to we can just let it go. We learned a bunch of things, but yeah, it's not worth doing it anymore. And also, a note to developers here is don't jump into thinking you're in the making it happen phase too early, because then people will assume that you're actually making it happen. So be honest and say if you are in the figure things out phase. And it's also very easy to communicate this to other parts of the organization, like managers and stuff. Like everyone understands how it is to go uphill and rolling downhill. It's very hard to communicate. Yeah, we're at 80%, we're at 60%, or we have 15 to-dos left. So having these hill charts as a way of communicating, then it's nice. And then you can just cancel all those daily stand-ups for that usually are just for communicating progress anyway. You have everything in one picture. All right, so that's communicating progress in another way. And now I'm going to talk about providing context. I started this talk with giving you the context about how remote work is different, how people assumed people who work remotely are, and gave you some stats and facts and figures. This is in order to provide you with a context that you need in order to follow along with what I'm trying to say. And if we were to look at it at the office, I have an idea. It's on the left side there. And then I ask some person, and some other person might overhear our discussion, and then we talk more at lunch, and then I meet some person at the coffee machine, and then we talk, and then I have the context in my head. So now I know how to build it. I think it's usually a fallacy, this. So context is built gradually, but then also the only person with all the context is actually me. So every person I talk to, they have a fractional context, and you sort of assume that everyone has the context. So there's a lot of miscommunication in the office, but you think you have communication. But when you move to remote working, you need to have an idea, but then you need to make it easy for people to understand, because just because you have an idea and you're really eager to tell someone about it, they might be deep in some problem solving. So you shouldn't disturb them, and you should be respectful of their attention and their time. So make it easy for them to understand where you are, and that means providing context. And I will show you an example of how that might look. So this is what I would do at the office, maybe. If you don't see it, I will read what they say. So this is me in Slack saying, anyone tried userlist.com? ? So what's wrong with this way of communicating? First of all, this took me 20 seconds to write. And what I actually did was I make everyone go to userlist.com, their website, and try to understand what userlist is. And then I don't explain why I'm interested in knowing about userlist, so it's hard to understand what I'm after. So I don't know how to provide any feedback to you. It's a yes and no question. I could just answer no, and you would get no value from that. And I don't invite people to a discussion about I get no value from the answers from this. But if you look at this, I'll read it out loud so you can follow through. So designing the onboarding flow for new users. Context, the current onboarding flow we have right now have been with us since we first launched 1 year ago. It was deemed good enough for the time being, but we see a lot of drop-off in customers converting from trial users to paid. This means we have a leaky bucket problem, and we want to fix before we start adding new features. That's giving the context to someone who is maybe new. They haven't been with us for a year. They started 2 months ago. And if they look at the code, they might say, oh, this is stupid. You can't design it like this. You can't send these emails just. But if you give some context, like it was deemed good enough for the time being, they will understand, and they don't look at the code and be all mad about what you've done, because everything is done within a context, and miscommunication is when you lose the context. And then also I explained that this means that we have a leaky bucket problem. This is setting the purpose of why we want to try to think about this. Why I want to take your attention away from whatever you're working on, because it actually has some value. And then I provide some facts. We currently have 2 emails being sent to the user signing up. Right after the user signs up, he or she gets an email with the account details, and 2, after a week, we send an email asking if they like the service. And then as a summary, I might have had a call with Susan about this, but other people haven't heard this conversation. So I need to summarize my conversation, what we came up with. So me and Susan talked about what we feel is missing, and both came to the conclusion that neither of us are really understand how user onboarding using email is supposed to work. And since it's not something that is core to what we do, we might want to look into signing up for a product that does it for us. We quickly found these 2, userlist.com and customer.io. What do you think? Does anyone else have any previous experience in this area or know someone who does? This will give me very different answers than the first one. I might have ad hoc'd myself, my way to getting this context and good answers at the office but I would have to disturb so many people and talk to and schedule so many meetings in order to get it. But this frames whatever I'm asking for. So it's not telling people what they're supposed to do. It's actually asking for their attention in a way that makes it easy for them to contribute with high quality content. And it took me 15 minutes to write, but I guess I saved, if 5 people looked at the first one, they would have gone to the website and tried to figure out what it's about. So maybe an hour for everyone lost attention. So me sending that 5-second question actually cost 5 hours of attention of other people, instead of me taking 50 minutes, thinking it through, writing it down, and so on. Another way of doing it is when we write code. So the left side only says disable threads, nothing more. It says what it does. There is no way to give feedback on this. There is no way to give, like, why do you disable threads? Yeah, it looks like you are disabling the threads. I don't know why. Is it good? Is it bad? Is there an alternative solution? Did you think about anything else? And then you look at the, excuse me, the right side. A lot of information, context, and then people acknowledging that it's a good comment, and then people can chime in and ask questions and refine it into that. This is a discussion, the right one. The left one will never end up in a discussion. It will end up in a dispute more. And so this is also having the discussion close to where the context is. So the context is code, then we should discuss it close to the code. We shouldn't discuss it in Slack or in a call. We should have it here, because then we're documenting it as we go, which means that we get the documentation that all developers hate to do for free. And it's there for someone who's new on the team as well. And as a power tip here, you can connect your GitHub or GitLab accounts to Slack, perhaps. So every time there is a comment or a merge or a pull request, it posts these things into the Slack channel, and then people can just browse through the discussions and chime in if they have more information, even if they're not on your team or working on your feature and so on. So it's the same way as you had at the office when people were starting to talk about code and stuff. You can also listen in on it in this way. All right, so we looked at how to provide context and what it actually makes, what it saves you in time and attention. So next is the knowledge sharing. I've spoken a little bit about it, that the knowledge sharing at the office, it was mostly verbal, but then there's also a risk here when we don't write it down, is that at the office and around the campfire, there are a few elders who sit there and tell the stories, and they have all the knowledge, but then when they go away to some other company or retire or whatever they do, all that knowledge is lost, which is a big risk. And they might be very extroverted and take up all the oxygen in the room, and so no one else can discuss their thoughts. So then it's only their thoughts, and then it's gone when they leave. So this is a Slack channel with a bunch of stuff. You don't have to read everything in the details, but this is basically how the office looks like. It's a bunch of different discussions on different topics that have nothing to do with each other, and no one knows what should I pay attention to. Is this are they talking about lunch, or are they talking about something's down in production, or and so on. So you shouldn't copy paste everything from the office when you move home. Like, don't do this. You should at least have some form of thought around how to do it. And so there is different urgency in these things. So if production is down, you probably want to notify as many people as possible so everyone can start working on it. But posting production errors and lunch requests in the same channel means that you will either overload people with notifications that are not important, or you will make people ignore important stuff. Because when you don't sit next to each other, you don't have the time aspect as well. So I might be away, I might be eating lunch, or I might be having a break, or whatever I'm doing. So we need to decide upfront what we use different channels for. So you can think of it as the most boring thing I can think of. It's the service level agreement, but it's very useful anyway. It's an agreement you sign between two companies that in order for me to buy your service, you need to respond in 1 hour, and then you need to fix the thing in 2 days at least. And if you don't, then yeah, you've broken the agreement. You can have the same things like for different types of information. So you can put all the announcements in an announcement channel, and the time to respond is best effort, or so you don't really need to, just for FYI. But then decisions, you might want to put them in, like, even if you discuss and you come up with something, you want to summarize them and put them so you know where you have all the decisions, because otherwise you need to read everything everywhere all the time, and no one can do that. Or they can do that, but they don't do any proper work then. So summarize and put decisions in one place as well. And then you have some really urgent stuff that everyone should pay attention to and have their notifications on if they have Slack. Because that is critical and most important. And having these things in writing means that you can make decisions. Even if someone writes in the announcement channel, then yeah, I'll look at it tomorrow. Doesn't really matter. But if it's really important, then you put it in a place where people have agreed to look at. So one of those things could be code reviews. If I've written code and I want someone to review it, we might have a response time of 1 hour, because that way I can go take a break and decompress and so on. And then you get to finish your stuff before you start jumping over to reviewing my thing. But you assume that someone will look at it in 1 hour at least, because you might not want to start with something new before you've gotten the review and fixed all the comments in that review. So be proactive about what the urgency of different types of information is. And then it's very logical for me as a new employee, maybe to go to decisions, and then I see whatever was decided, or announcements. I've seen what's been happening, and yeah, then I get a big context of whatever is what's happened. But then also do internal demos. Small is better. So if I finish a feature, then if I've been working on it by myself, I might just record a screencast of it or write it down, and invite people. Like, everyone can join, no requirements, but I made this thing, I want to tell you about it, and this is how I made it. in order to, so it's not just a reviewer of code who understands the context, but you can actually describe it to the whole team. It's a good way to get recognition or give recognition to people. It's a good way to celebrate that progress is being made, because that is usually like, if I write something and I push some code, doesn't really give me that good feeling of saying, yeah, let's go get a coffee now. We made progress. So this is a good way of celebrating and bringing the team together. It's also a very good way to transfer knowledge, not just between people, but for myself, because I need to summarize it. I need to present it. I need to actually understand it in order to communicate it. And that's the way, that's the time when you know you understand something, is when you can actually teach someone else. And it also encourages ad hoc technical discussions. Like, I may have started using a reactive way of writing code, maybe for something. And then someone else who's tried that before say, oh, so that's how you did it. Yeah, I tried it before and I didn't really understand how to do it. But now I think we might want to pair up and do some reactive coding over here where I failed it before. So it's also a very good way to just have technical discussions and everyone can listen to them. And this can absolutely be done either over video phone, or you can record it and people can comment on it asynchronously. So it doesn't have to be real time, more on their time. So that's for sharing knowledge. But then the last thing I want to talk about is actually you, and how to communicate how you are doing. I read a book a while ago. It's the 4 agreements that you have with yourself. And the 4th agreement that you have is do your best every day, because then you can never be like, you can never regret anything. But if you do your best every day, you're fine. But your best is different from day to day. And this is like a nuance that's hard to see until it's too late. At the office, you had this. It's a meeting. Should you cancel this meeting or maybe call for a break? I think so. This woman will probably notice the feeling and tension in the room and say, no, let's call it today. Let's continue tomorrow. But when you are on video chat and stuff like that, this is what it looks like. Everyone looks very green. They look like they are 100% there. And that's one of the things with video, is that you need to sort of perform and in front of a grand jury of people. But then I also remember that 70% of all communication is nonverbal. So you're missing 70% of how these people are doing, actually. So this might be what they look like. Some people are red. One person is completely burning up. The person at the top, he's really liking this because he might be an extremely extroverted person, so he likes these video conferences. And the person at the bottom is an introvert, like me, who just can't bear them because it just drains his energy. This also shows that there are different people on your team. It's not one size fits all. This is also why you need to decide on how you want to communicate and in what way and what is the response time and so on, because there are different people and different people have different ways of figuring things out. But it's easy to think that this is how it always looks. So in order to explain this, I was talking to my son, or he came to me, and he said he plays a lot of Pokemon Go, which is it drains the battery of the phone very fast. But so he always keeps it charged to 100% all the time. So when he goes to school, he will have the opportunity to play as much Pokemon Go as he can. But then after a while, he said, like, Dad, I don't understand. I always have my phone on 100%. But then I remove the charger, and then it takes 10 minutes, and then it's down to 20%. And then I say, yep, you know, if you keep charging your phone to 100%, you'll degrade your battery. So you have 100%. Absolutely, it says so in the number, but it's 100% of 20% because that's your capacity of your battery. And if you keep pushing it and charging it to 100%, you will actually destroy it, which is what this is. If you keep pushing it to 100 and assuming or thinking you are at 100% every day, because that's how it looks for other people, then you will probably burn out. So I created an algorithm. Being a developer, I like to systematize things. So I started with how much energy do you start your day with? And this is something that only you can control by yourself. It's how much you sleep, how well you eat, if you're having trouble with your personal life, if you have like a parent who's sick or whatever, the things affect your energy and the way you sleep and so on. So on a scale of 1 to 10, like every morning, rate this. Today, I would say I have a 7 because I was it was hard leaving the kids at school. We had a little bit of a fight and so on. So my energy starting is not a 10. It's never a 10. I'm happy if I have an 8. So it's a 6 today. And then I have how in control of your attention are you today? And that this is different between different people. My distractions, which distractions are the thing that deletes my attention or decreases my attention. Many meetings, if I have tight deadlines, really tight, that don't really make sense to me. Why? And if priorities keep changing, then I feel I'm not in control of my attention at all. So if I had, so today I have this presentation and I have a few meetings after this, which means that, I'm not going to do anything unless it's called this quality work. I'm not going to do any deep work about like programming and designing and thinking strategically today because of all these things. So I would put my control on my attention on a 3 or maybe a 4. So I had 6 with my energy and a 4 here. And then you simply multiply them. So 6 times 4, it's 24, right? And so I only have 24% available of deep work focus today. So then I need to, when I've done this, I can actually realistically think about how much can I do. And this was something that was done in the, like if someone comes into the office and I see her like really tired and I know that they just had a baby, I don't expect them to perform at 100%. I expect them to perform at 20% actually, because me being a human looking at another human, I can see those things and I can adjust my expectation on them. But when you work from home, nothing of that is apparent. So you need to communicate this in a way, and this is something that's worked for me, and also on a very good day, I have 8 times 8. That means I have 64% capacity. I never have 100% capacity in my battery because I'm never a new phone. So then also you can communicate these numbers between you, because then if someone noticed that Tobias has been having 20% for the last week, like maybe I should just check in on him to see how he's doing, or maybe seeing if I can cancel a bunch of meetings because that really drains him. But you need to talk about these things and be proactive instead of reactive. So just to say, like, what we talked about how to communicate progress in a way that everyone understands. And we also talked about how to provide context both for learning, but also for being respectful of other people's attention and their time. And because you don't really know if someone's always going to be in front of a computer. I spend a lot of time away from the computer because I can't think in front of the computer. I need to sit somewhere else. And then how to share knowledge and that you need to be intentional about sharing the knowledge, not just when you're done with something, you just pick up the next one, share it, get some recognition, and have some discussions. And then also about setting the realistic expectations, because it's hard working from home. You get a lot of benefit, but then also there are skills you need to exercise in order to get good at it. But then because one of those is to knowing yourself and knowing how you work best and being kind to yourself as well. So just to get back to this, like we ended up in the beginning, we started in the middle of the 4, and if simply continuing without designing and thinking intentionally how to work from home, it's going to go downwards. But if you start deciding and thinking about and being proactive, you can start going into the 5th phase with increasing productivity again and increasing energy, so you don't end up like this. So that was all I had. But then also this is generic advice that it's not precisely for everyone. So if you go to remote.tobiastalltorp.com, you can schedule a half hour with me so we can talk through what issues you are having and what you might be able to do about it. So I've opened up a few slots in my calendar for that. So remote.tobiastalltorp.com. So questions? Let's see, I will open the chat. I can't see anything in the chat. Anyone have a question? Some really good insights. Thank you. From David. Okay, what did you say about daily stand-ups that changed due to working remotely? Okay, that was I'll go back to the hill charts. The way that you don't have to always communicate what you are doing, what you have done yesterday, and what you are, if there are any problems, like the standard Scrum questions, basically. It's more important to see, like, if I have a problem, then if you use the hill charts, and that will be apparent that there is a problem with this thing. And if you can absolutely still keep the stand-ups because it's a good way to see each other, but it's meetings when you work remotely are very costly, and they because you have to synchronize people's attention at one time. So if for me example, if you have a stand up at 9, then you sliced my attention in 2 parts, which makes it it doesn't really work very well for me, because then I have to get out of my attention zone and then I have to get back into it. So if you want to go the full remote way of totally asynchronous, so then these hill charts is a good way of communicating what the feeling is, and then you can simply write it down in 3 bullets in Slack or Teams or wherever you want, because it's always necessary that everyone talks about everything all the time, and it also is this way of disturbing other people. So did that sort of answer your question? Mm-hmm. And that, so this is the case of working when you try to make up the. Okay, so this is in the case of working solo, or also when you try to make up the focus of the day. Let's see. The focus of the day is more for yourself and then communicating to your team, because it you can combine them also. This hill chart is mostly to get everyone aligned and on the same page, and then also for me to see that, oh, this first person is seems to have problems with getting this done. Either they might be tired and have low focus, so it might be that I should take over it or offer to help or cancel some meetings so they can focus. But it might also be that we need to split it down into smaller pieces, or maybe refine it further and so on. So they can be used together. Mainly what I'm saying. Phases described initially, are they based on your own opinion, which is fine? Yeah, it's pretty anecdotal. It's a feeling that when I've talked around with different teams, it's been, you postpone the design of how to work, basically. You've been ad hocing it in the beginning, and that's fine because it's faster to try a lot of things. But then after a while, you can't just start prototype your way into it. So after a while, you need to add some design into your process and think about what actually works and what doesn't work. And that's basically what you want your retrospective to do for you. That's where you talk about these things. So, but it's something that I've noticed in different teams, that there's the initial bump where you're learning a lot, and that's interesting, and you're willing to spend a lot of energy on that because you're learning. But then when you don't learn anymore, it's harder to keep up the motivation and spend all that energy, and then you just sort of lose momentum a little bit, because then you need to design a supporting structure for you, so you don't have to power through it all the time. Then as in focus for the team to work together to achieve goal, completing a story. So I need to combine these things. As in focus for the team to work together to achieve a goal, completing a story. Okay. Okay, I will never mind that. Perfect. All right. Any more questions? No? Yeah, just a reminder, remote.tobiastalltorp.com if you want to ask some more specific questions. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.